Welcome to episode 149, the continuation of Social Media Decoded with Carlin Ankrum.
Welcome to the PR Playbook Podcast, the only podcast giving you actionable skills and advice you need to execute a strategic PR program. Warning: what you hear next may lead to brand awareness and increased sales and customer exposure. Now here's your host, Rinjini Joshua.
Hello and welcome to episode 149, Social Media Decoded. I'm back here with our friend Carlin Ankrum from, a few episodes ago. Hey, Carlin, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Happy to be here once again.
Yes, I'm happy to come back to this conversation of decoding social media and really helping, I guess, mostly B2B or just people who are also DIYing their social media to understand how to fully grasp that whole challenge of social media. And it's such a big one because I know from doing it for clients that it's not easy, right? So I have so many questions, but we're going to answer the question that we didn't answer in our last episode, which is really, what is the biggest challenge that companies are facing when they're deciding to integrate social media into their business and into their marketing strategy?
I love this question because the answer might be one that is a little bit unexpected. And it's that we need to focus on our goals and where we want to take our brand and our business and not paying attention to what everyone else is doing. Even if you are in the same industry, your strategy will be different based on your goals. So it's easy for influencers and content creators to be out here in the social media streets being like, do 30 reels in 30 days, do this, do that. When in reality, that might not have anything to do with where we want to be going. And
Yeah, it's confusing.
it's confusing and it can feel really hard and really
Yeah.
clunky and very uninspiring if you're trying to be everyone else. There's this
Mhm.
level of authenticity that needs to happen, whether you're a personal brand, a solopreneur, or part of a larger team that needs
Mhm.
to come to the forefront in order for your content to be effective. And I think that gets lost a lot in today's very noisy social media landscape.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that happens with media relations too, right?
Mhm.
We're suffering from that as well on the PR side. And I think to your point, navigating social media by like really targeting your audience, I think we were, unfortunately we did not record this fun segment that we talked about right before, but you were talking about making sure to deliver your message to your audience and like what they needed. So can you
Yes.
talk a little bit more about how to create content based on what your audience needs versus what you think you should be doing?
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly right is in order for us to show up as authentically as ourselves or as our brand, we need to create content for our audience first. And a great way to do that is do some of that market research to social listen. So use different tools so you know what they are needing and focus on that first. And if you do that, the challenge or the imposter syndrome that might creep in when you're going to record a video should
Yeah.
evaporate because the content is not about you, it's about them.
Right. How do you when you're like social is all everything you're saying sounds like a lot of time. Okay. And right, like we're kind of preaching to the DIY group or the group that has limited resources. So before we get into my next question, I would love to talk about time commitments and how much time do you feel it takes to create the type of content that delivers exactly what you're saying, the content that our audience needs, how much time does it typically take to create and deliver that kind of content?
This is an incredible question because the answer is, well, it depends.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is as you get better at creating the content,
Yeah.
it will go faster. It used to take me 45 minutes to create a reel. As an example, it now takes me about 10 minutes. And that's significant, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of where I was getting stuck was in the techno babble and the mechanics of it all, when really what mattered most was the storyline. And I'm really good at pushing that out there quickly. So I want you to think about it, those that are listening that are doing the DIYs, in two kind of veins. One, from a time perspective, is creating the content itself, right? So doing the doing. The other is that engagement, the responding. So mapping out the content ahead of time is one part. And I do that at a month ahead. And that takes me anywhere from 2 to 4 hours if
Yeah.
I'm doing 3 to 5 posts a week. Then the engagement is I try to map that into when the content is being scheduled, 15 minutes before the content is scheduled and 15 minutes after. What am I doing in those 15 minutes? Beforehand, I'm engaging with relevant hashtags. I'm engaging with relevant local posts, people on my feed, and in my stories, if we're speaking just strictly Instagram for this example.
Yeah.
Then 15 minutes after my content goes live, I am there if people are engaging in my post to respond back to them. And I'm continuing to nurture hashtag stories, feed posts, and responding with actual words, not just emojis. Okay. Because it helps condition the algorithm to be like, oh, this is active. And when you are quickly responding to comments on your own posts, that will help bubble it up to the top of someone's feed because they're saying, oh, there's good conversation happening here. There's great engagement happening here. Let's show that to more people. So that's a really great
Do you
hack.
plan on commenting on your own post before like you even post? Like, do you always comment on your own stuff?
I won't unless they comment on my stuff. Like if someone else
Somebody else
comments,
does it
I will
first.
be,
You're not the
yeah,
first one.
no,
Okay.
no.
I've heard that
Unless I'm like
before. It's
adding
like,
like a hashtag list,
yeah,
which I will do sometimes, and other times I'll wait till later. So
I've
just
heard
depends.
I've heard people tell me to do that. Like, oh, add a hashtag list as the
Yep.
first comment.
Yep. Yep.
Does that actually work?
I have not seen the data to really skew me one way or another. I just like things to look a little bit neater, just like from a
Mm.
visual like aesthetic.
Yeah.
So I like to do it in the first comment with a lot of periods before it, so it's not even clunking up my comment section. So that's just me.
Right.
And I've not seen data that says, oh, putting it in the first comment is better than just putting it in the caption. I have not
Right.
seen it there. So
What about okay, you're talking about once someone's engaging, then you're there and you're engaging, but like what if you've been posting and this is chronic for
Mhm.
most of our
Okay.
clients. You're posting and you don't have engagement yet. Like how do you get people to actually do something? Do you ask them a question? I've personally tried a lot of things and this is LinkedIn versus Instagram. So that's
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit harder. But like how do you get that first level of engagement?
I think the first thing is to make sure that you're optimizing your captions appropriately. And one thing to do is make it really easy for someone to take action. Don't ask them this like enormous thought provoking, hurts my brain kind of question. Literally ask them, share a thumbs up emoji if you agree with this. That's easy for someone to take
Yeah.
action on versus tell me your entire life story of why you're an early bird. Like it's just hard for people to think about that answer. So one, making sure you have some type of call to action. You could also think of other simple things that to put up at the top of your caption, like save this for later or make sure to share it with others in your network who might find this valuable. So
Oh, nice.
thinking beyond just the comment, because that also plays a role in the overarching algorithm of having your content bubble up to the surface of a feed. And then the other thing is just make sure you are creating that engagement outreach as well. So not just waiting for people to come to you.
Yeah.
Are you doing your due diligence and also going and talking to other people who might be your ideal audience or where your other audience hangs out on social. So other groups or other accounts that you know that your audience is already very tuned into, and start engaging there as well.
Again, this is all just like the time, like the clock is like ticking every time you mention any of these things. And I'm just
Oh,
thinking,
yeah.
you say before and after, 15 minutes before, 15 minutes after. Is
Yep.
that really like 30 minutes a day? Is that really enough time?
I think it's enough time if you're intentional about it. And the reason
Yeah.
why I say that is it's really easy to be like, all right, I'll just be on there for 30 minutes. And then you get sucked into the rabbit hole that is that social. And then you're like, wait,
Yeah.
how did I get here? So 30 minutes of intentional time is time well spent. Because if you think about it, you already did the work and already put in the time to create that piece of content that's going out. So really spending 30 minutes a day live on there engaging is plenty of time if you are being strategic about it and intentional, not just like scrolling for the sake of scrolling.
What do you think the difference between, like you mentioned that you schedule a month out.
Yes.
What about if you just schedule a week out? Like what would be the difference between that and, should you how do you determine whether you should schedule a month or a week, you know?
I love this because it all goes back to self-awareness. For me, when I was doing a week out, it was stressing me out, like totally. And I was like, this isn't something that I can sustain. And so for me, I set up a batching time. And for me, I'm most creative in the morning. That's when, my phone is quiet, my inbox can be left untouched for a couple of hours, and I create content, whether it's video, whether it's graphics, whether it's captions. I create that all at once because once I'm in flow, the ideas just start to come. Where for me,
Right.
starting and stopping and starting and stopping every single week feels hard. But I also give myself the space and the grace to add things in when I feel like it's appropriate to do so. That's what's really cool about social media too, is things
Yeah.
happen and bubble up and change. And you know what? Just because I scheduled this last month doesn't mean I can't move it. I can move it to later. I can change it up because I
Yeah,
have
and
that
I've noticed
control.
that when I'm scheduling in advance, the ideas flow, like you said, they
Yes.
just flow better. And then you're like, oh wow, well actually I have this idea instead. And then you could just move that piece of content to somewhere else. And you're like, oh my gosh, I have so many ideas all the time. Versus like, oh shit, what do I post today?
Yes.
Right? It's like
Exactly.
you feel
Yes.
like you're kind of trapped when you're just doing it.
And
The
then it feels hard.
Yes, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, oh, the stress of, oh, what am I going to post this week? It's like, I don't know. But if I know that I have a time and space on my calendar and I make it non negotiable, on the last Monday morning before the next month kicks in, and then I can feel at ease. And then
Yeah.
I can add organic things as they pop up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just
Do
less
you,
stress.
yeah, this is so stressful. I had a question on the tip of my tongue, but I forgot what it is. Okay, that's okay. It'll come back to me. But in the meantime, okay, so we got this stuff going. We're doing 15 minutes, like 30 minutes a day. We're kind of engaging. So when we're talking about growth, so this is a problem I've had. I'm working on newsletter subscribers on LinkedIn. I'm just
Mhm.
gonna just put my
Yeah.
example out there.
Yeah.
And I've been doing the newsletter pretty regularly and it's growing like little by little and it's exciting to see it grow. And I have a target number that obviously nobody else cares about. But, you know, without spending inordinate amounts of money to get subscribers, what should you be looking at as like a normal growth pattern? And I'm guessing it probably varies depending on the platform.
It does vary depending on the platform. And I will say it's all over the place. And so there
Uh,
isn't one like, this is the number you should expect because you could have randomly something catch fire in the best way
Yeah,
and
really
go
great
viral.
post or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And go viral. And then you've grown by, 500 to 1,000 new people. literally instantly. And I've seen that happen. And one, it freaked my client out, and because she was not ready for that. But I say all this to say your audience, whatever platform it is, you do not own. So for me personally, I care less about how many followers you have and more about the people who are subscribing to your email list in
Right.
whatever capacity that is. So how are you connecting those digital dots intentionally? And if you have 10,000 followers and you don't have at least 75% of those people's email addresses, you're doing it wrong. So you need to figure out ways to grab their attention and move them from the platform
Uh-huh.
to your email list. And that
What
is
are
the big
some ways?
there's some ways. I love this. Create what we call in the marketing world lead magnets,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
A free thing for them to download that gives them a
Right.
little bit of the what and less of the how, because in order to do the how, they have to hire you, right? Like we're not giving
Right.
away
Right.
free over here. Listen, we don't do free. So what checklist could you have? What
Yeah.
easy tutorial could you give them that they are itching to get from an expert like yourself, and give their email address in exchange for that? That has
Right.
to be something that you have on your website. It doesn't need to be a ton of things. It could just be one, and you're directing traffic to that landing page so people can opt in to get that. And then on the back end,
So
you emails.
so this is exactly
Yeah.
the essential question, right? It's like, how do you get them? So if you do this on LinkedIn, you have to
Mhm.
pay, right? To get that to do the lead magnet, like the lead gen ads, like that to capture
Ads.
that
Yeah.
email, right? But if you're trying to get them to go to a website, so let's say you're trying to get them to go to your website to fill out the form, again, you have to find out what that attractive thing is.
Yes.
It's so difficult to identify what that piece is gonna be. Is this trial and error?
I think so, but I also think if you really pay attention to your audience and the frequently asked questions you get all the time, that will be a big flag to say, okay, you need to create something that helps this client with XYZ thing. So,
Yeah.
example, I'm like a lead magnet junkie. I will just be transparent because I don't specialize in one particular platform. I have freebies on my resources page for every platform pretty much. Um,
What page is that? What
OSNAP
page?
Social, osnapsocial.com/resources. Get them
Okay.
there. No. And one of them I just is under construction. I recently just fixed it to be more updated, was something about Instagram Reels. What are the types of Instagram Reels you can make? What are some ideas that you could
Yeah.
create? And then, oh, by the way, Instagram changed the way that you are editing and uploading and creating Reels now. So here's a tutorial video step by step on how to do that. Because a lot of my clients don't know what to post and then don't know how to operate the mechanics to get the
Yeah.
post out there. It feels hard. It feels clunky. They need a play by play, and they'd rather hear it from me than
Yeah.
some random person on YouTube. And
Right.
that sure is what it is. So those kind of scratch both of the itches, if you will, for my clients.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's listening, hearing what they're saying, and giving them what they want.
Yeah, I like that you said it's more of the what and less of the how, exactly
Yeah.
how to do. I mean, obviously you want people to hire you or you want them to use your service or product or whatever,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean that you're still not giving away a little bit of education about.
Yes. And you have to. You have to be willing to give some of that value away
Yeah.
consistently, time after time, in order to grow.
And I feel like it has to be super digestible, which that I think also becomes the problem. You don't want to become too technical. You want it to be, I don't is it Medium that does like 1 minute read? It's like
Yeah.
it tells you like it's gonna take you 1 minute to do this. So the shorter it's gonna take to consume that information, I think the better.
And that's a great tip, because I think a lot of experts know a lot about what they do.
Yes. We want to,
And
and then once we start rolling, we just give it all. It's like,
yeah. So it's, again, break it down into digestible pieces that what do we people say, like that a third grader could understand it.
yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna go back to the growth question though, and I'm gonna say
Mhm.
what could be, and maybe you can give us an example like on Instagram or like, well, I'm LinkedIn, so like I love LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever. What what do you see as like an average organic growth metric that like you could be proud of with like to know that you're on the right track?
You're really forcing my hand here, aren't you?
I know
And,
it's fine. But just like a general rule of thumb, like, okay, I've,
yeah.
doing 10% a month, or I don't know if that's even relevant, but
I think it goes back to looking at your growth month over month. So if your
yeah.
growth month over month is 20 new followers every single month, great.
Uh-huh.
See if you can double that next month by being more intentional. And so I think it all goes retroactively to who your audience is, what you're looking for. So keeping a consistent growth rate is excellent, but also being hyper aware that the algorithm's going to change and really turn your goals upside down and sideways. So keeping that consistent growth means that you're on the right track. If it dips down, ask yourself, why did it dip down? Why are people not following? Why are people unfollowing? And adjust your content accordingly. But in my experience, I don't know if there's like a baseline like you're searching for. I don't
Right.
know there to be a baseline. Like if you're having growth, if you're having engagement, if you're getting people to your website, then you're doing everything right.
Right. So you
But
just
your
have to be
number is
really
going to be
on
different than my number, which is going to be different from, someone
somebody else.
else's number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then when you guys are doing work, how do you deliver growth? Or how do you deliver measurements and metrics? Like what is it that I mean, you just kind of mentioned it a little bit.
Yeah.
But what are we looking at? Let's say if we're looking at Instagram, what are we looking at? And if we're looking at LinkedIn, what are we looking at? I don't even know. It's Facebook. Do people even look at Facebook anymore?
I know. Very rarely, but it is a thing still. I think
Yeah.
the first thing is we always check the pulse of everyone's existing social media platforms and channels. And the reason
Yeah.
why we do that is it allows us to draw like a line in the sand and say, okay, this is where we're starting from. This is the growth rate. And then we also pop the hood over on Google Analytics, which gives us a lot of
Okay.
intel of referral traffic of saying, okay, Instagram is driving, you know, 20 clicks a week. Great. Organically. Because we can say paid versus organic. We can tell if it's
Yeah.
from mobile or desktop, whatever. Our goal is to obviously increase that, but we have to map it to whatever our client's goal is. So if they want to increase website traffic, how are we doing that on each of the
Uh-huh.
platforms that we're managing? If they want to get more profile views, right? So more discoverability, more visibility, how are we doing that? And that goes back into the engagement side of the house. And then we measure everything to that. So every single month we run the numbers, we say what's working, what's not working. Here's our engagement result rate. Here's where we're at according to the SMART goals, right? That we outlined. So the specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound goals that we've mapped in the strategy based on what their overarching marketing goals are. Because
Uh-huh.
again, social is just a sliver of all of the marketing tactics that many companies and solopreneurs are doing.
Yeah.
So if you're putting all of your eggs into the social media basket, perhaps reconsider. But it's something that needs to ladder up to your overarching marketing objectives and goals. It cannot
Right.
operate on its own island. It needs to be tailored to map and align with all the other goals you have in
And
mind.
I think that is like the biggest PR conundrum that we have. Like it's so
Yes.
historic and eternal. It's people siphon or silo marketing, sales, PR, social media. And
Yes.
I've been really talking about integrated communications. And over the last, I think, like 4 or 5 years, we've been talking about why is everything so siloed? They're actually all connected. Like if you're not delivering the same message at every step, you're
Yes.
then the customer. So it's really interesting that people do not feel that how critical it is for integration between these departments. And one of the biggest tips that we give on we have a PR summit in December, And usually when we're talking about integrated communications, we're like, hey, like have a monthly call with your sales team. Like
Yes.
I tell people you get the best PR tips from the sales team because the sales team is actually doing the selling. That they're actually addressing the needs of the customer. So like
And the
that's who
pain
you
point. Yeah.
right. That's who
Yeah.
you need to be talking to. And they get like, they're like, what? Like they're like, well, we don't want to bother sales with PR. But okay, but then it's not gonna work.
Yeah.
So
You hit the biggest problem that I see too on my side is like
yeah.
they hand off social media to like the young person
Yeah.
in in on the team because that and no shade. Like for
Yeah.
those Gen Zers out there who are crushing social media, good on you. But there's
Yeah.
also this disconnect in the generations of traditional marketing has nothing to do with social, and social has nothing to do with traditional marketing, it's nothing to do with sales. Da, 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 da. It's like, to your point, it needs to come together. It needs to be fully integrated, and everyone needs to be on the same page of where
Right.
we're going and what we're trying to do with all of these efforts. It
Yeah.
baffles me how disconnected they are
Yeah,
in a lot of
they think they're their own little, like you said, island.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
you're living on your own island.
Yeah. And so, like, I'm always talking to CEOs and leadership. I'm like, invite the social media intern or the social media manager into your marketing and sales meetings because
Yes.
they will also hear what you're hearing from a pain point perspective. And
Right.
they might already be hearing it over in social media if they're doing some social listening. And then you
Yeah.
guys can have a meeting of the minds of like, how do we overcome that objection? Or how do we address that pain point from a marketing perspective? There's
Right.
power in numbers. And I think everything is unfortunately still today
Yeah.
very disconnected.
Right. I just that's the one. It's really hard even for me as a PR person to say, okay, how do we educate people on understanding that those pieces have to go together for them to work? And it's like they're fighting it. They just don't want to hear it because they're like, well, I don't want to have to deal with another meeting, maybe. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what it is. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
people don't want meetings.
Yeah. And a lot of leadership, they don't, I mean, and I'm generalizing here, but a
Yeah.
lot of leadership does not truly understand the power of social media.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're like, la, 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 la. I don't want to talk about it. I don't know enough about it.
Well, okay, then going back to the power, one thing I wanted to ask you when you were talking about the metrics was how often do you measure them? Like you were mentioning like, oh, you should check, your growth, you should check your engagement. How often are you looking at this? Because sometimes when I tell people like, okay, I run ads for people before, right? So we were running ads and they're like, okay, how's it doing? It's like the next day. And I'm like, well, Facebook told me that it's gonna take 2 weeks to figure this out, like, you have to
Yeah.
wait a little bit, and people do not have patience when they're spending money, especially in advertising, right?
Yeah.
So, when you're not spending money even, what is the waiting period? Like, what should you be looking at? What is it week after week, month after month? Like, what is that measurement time frame?
So overarching, I do a monthly report for my clients. However,
Month.
I will also look week over week. And I borrowed that. This is from another agency I used to work for. They would do what they called like weekly seesaws.
Okay.
And they would say,
I
what
think
was
I've
the
heard of
top
this before.
perform? Yeah. What's the top post? What's the bottom post? And then write up a few sentences of why that worked well and why that didn't work well. And the reason why you do that is by the end of the month, when you're looking at all of the metrics for the month, you can be like, what happened here on week 2? Then you can go back to your executive summary and that seesaw and be like, oh, right. That content didn't perform as well because it was a 3-holiday weekend. There were 3 holidays happening on this
Uh,
one weekend. And that's where our content didn't perform as well because people were spending time doing something else.
right. Wow. Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's like,
Okay,
yes,
so
and
so the monthly and the weekly just to kinda get a little better insight on them.
yes.
Daily is not happening.
Oh,
That's
no, no.
silly.
You'll drive
Yeah,
yourself
that's
crazy if you do that. Don't do that.
yeah. And then let's say if you're gonna do an analysis of, okay, overall, this is the we've been following this strategy. what would you say is the time frame that you want to do like analysis and like a gut check?
Yeah, I typically do a gut check every 6 months.
Okay.
I also have clients that prefer every quarter. But 6 months is really where we can kind of really dive into what has been working. Are we on track with our goals? Really have things changed within the business model and recalibrate the strategy document, because we do build robust strategy documents for all of our clients, knowing that it is very much a malleable document and it will change
Yeah.
as kind of continue our growth and continue working with that client. So, yeah, I would say every 6 months is a good rule of thumb that we like to stick to.
What do you say for people who will be like 6 months is a long time, I can't commit? Like, well, okay, this is a sales objection pretty much because
Yeah.
this happens to me all the time. And
Yeah.
it's funny because I believe you when you say, okay, we got to measure this at 6 months. But even if I believe you, I'm gonna say, well, I don't know if I'm willing to do an investment for 6 months. Can you just tell me, can we just do this in 3 months? Or
Yeah.
can we be able to see a movement within 1 to 2 months so that I know that it's working? Like, this is, the stuff people say
Oh,
all the
yeah.
time.
I get that all the time. We will not do less than 3 months because
Yeah.
typically it takes us a month to get in the groove. Month two is like we're still figuring out. Month three is like the algorithm's finally kind of understanding what we're putting out there into the world, and we can really measure accurately, because our clients get very excited the first 2 months because they go from posting nothing to posting
Move.
stuff, and their analytics are like inflated. And
Yeah.
so they get super jazzed. And so we always have to tell them, like, this is inflated metrics. It's because you went from posting nothing to posting something. Where
Right.
we're going to start to really find the results around month 3. And because of that, that's why I always say, to see the results that you're looking for, 6 months is the best
Better
frame.
metric. Yeah.
It is. It just is.
Because you're
And
evening out. You're evening out and you're like cutting into a real flow. I mean,
yeah.
this is the hardest thing to explain.
Mhm.
And I mean, this is why we do the DIY stuff, because we say, oh, wait, hey, try this yourself and see what happens.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if you try it yourself, you'll see that you need this time and then you'll understand what we're doing. And
Yes.
it is a very difficult industry. This all of communications is very, very difficult and challenging to explain and educate. And, we do the best we can on our meetings or whatever, but it's
Oh,
like still, I think right now, and I want to get into this conversation before we end this
yeah.
about trends. But right
Mhm.
now, we're just seeing people and things moving at a really rapid rate. They're not I don't think people realize, like, all the stuff that we're seeing today were planted a long time ago. It's not like it didn't come up today. And that's the thing, is like you really do have to strategize and think ahead.
Mhm.
So, as we kind of end this conversation for today,
Yeah.
what can we see as like new trends that people should be watching out for or preparing for? We're closing out the year, coming up to 2024. I don't know if there's something that you're seeing, any trends in social media that people should be monitoring?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I'm seeing is niche specific groups happening around either it's your industry or, something that you like within your industry. People are gravitating on how to make their experience on social more
Yes.
relevant to them.
So then
More
you're
like,
gonna have smaller captive audiences.
correct. Smaller, more engaged, more solution oriented people who are going to be attracted to you, and your audience is going to feel more intimate. I wouldn't say necessarily, because you can still have like a large audience,
Yeah.
have it feel very intimate. So I think there's a different change that's already kind of happening, and the adoption of other tools like Discord, which is kind of like micro niche specific audiences in a Slack kind of format
Yeah.
that people are adopting. Facebook groups, I think, are still around, but I think people are starting to tune out of them. So until some of those admins really think of ways to make their audience feel more intimate, those might be something that is not as well adopted. But yes, everyone's looking to make the very noisy space that is the internet more relevant to them. And I think the algorithms are getting smarter to help us do that too.
Good. That's excellent. I'm just gonna end on that. That's a
Yeah.
great point. Well, obviously, when it comes to social media, there's a lot to think about. Do you guys offer any kind of, this is like a total plug, shameless plug, but do you guys offer any kind of like strategy session or anything like that where you just talk about strategy?
Yeah, so we have strategy sessions available, 1 hour increments. We also have what we call like brainstorm and a snaps, where it's two
Yeah.
hours. And we are creating the content, like mapping it out, storyboarding it, all of that. So you can just plug it in and do it yourself. And then we have one other item that we can elevate from that brainstorm where it's called content and a snap, where we are sitting on a Zoom and you're creating your video content while at the same time, while you're doing that, I'm over here working away creating graphics, captions, setting up your content calendar so that when you leave that session, you have 15 to 36 pieces of content like ready to crank. It's
Oh,
awesome.
nice. So it's like a
Yeah.
cool little like quick, it's like a quick start guide.
Yeah, quick start. And it helps those that maybe feel a little bashful in doing video. It gets them a little bit more comfortable and also gives them someone like me in their back pocket to bounce the ideas and make sure what they're saying is resonating to an audience that,
Yeah.
maybe is not as well versed in the topic that they're talking about.
I might have to take you up on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on. It's a fun
Come on
time.
over. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I think we answered some really big questions. Yeah, I mean, these are the things that we are all thinking about, but we're like at that moment we don't have the answer. And so I think I'm gonna have to get a good title for this particular podcast so people know that the answers are here within our conversation.
Your question answered.
Answered. Thanks so much. And listen to the PR Playbook podcast. If you guys have any questions, you can check out Carlin and OSNAP Social, and her information should be in the show notes. But you can always contact me, Ronjini at thesilvertelegram.com, and we'll talk to you guys next time.